Hi, everyone. Welcome to Master the World. I'm going to ask our panelists, Evan, Tim, Madeline, if you can bring up your cameras, that would be great. Thank you for joining us. I know it's the beginning of a holiday weekend, so I'm sure everybody's got lots and lots to do. But nevertheless, it's exciting for us to all be here. Just some housekeeping as we wait for people to come in. Of course, as always, let us know where you're coming in from. Just give us a heads up as to where you are. Evan, where are you today?
I am in my dining room here in San Francisco. It's sunny today, although it was raining yesterday, which is a mixed blessing at this time of year. We need the water, but it would be nice to not have it raining up in the wine country when you're running around like I was yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we have Madeline Triffon. Madeline, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling from rainy, cool Metro Detroit, and I'm in the second floor of my my home, and very happy to be with all y'all.
Of course. And of course, Tim, where are you coming in from today?
Well, hola from the teeming megapolis of Rio Rancho, New Mexico, where it's a beautiful spring day here. It's been windy all week, but it's wonderful today.
Thank you again to everyone for joining us. I know tonight is the first night of Passover. Oh my God. I literally have people gathering at my house. For those of you who don't know, my family celebrates Jewish holidays, and I have on my list the things that I'm supposed to be responsible for the Seder tonight. So if you're joining us and celebrating Seder tonight, congratulations for being awesome and being here. Thank you so much for doing that. And for those of you who are celebrating Easter, I can't believe you're letting us have your time today. So again, thank you. If you are sharing information about where you are, we would love to hear it. Make sure you select everyone so that everyone can see your chat, not just the four of us up here. Also wanted to share with you guys tasting notes. We have the QR code. This came with your box. Don't worry, if you QR code, you have an available phone, it's not going to reveal all the wines, but it will help you get into the right place if you wanted to taste along with the grids, or if you wanted to get to a single blind tasting, meaning know the wines but don't know what order they're in. And of course, if you want to join the leaderboard, that is the code to join the leaderboard. People have been very shy, or it's just too much to multitask on a call like this. So without further ado, I want to say welcome to everyone. We're going to flip to our first slide here. Let's make sure. I've had technical difficulties all day, so let me just make sure. I'm going to share the slideshow, and we are going to flip. Okay. Sorry about that. All right, here we go. Okay, so welcome to Master the World. I want to make sure this has happened before. You are on 129A, and if you're not sure, because you've got so many kits, 129A is on the side of your box. Please make sure you're on 129A before you dive in and drink all your wines. And of course, if you run into an issue, you started drinking 130A and you're on the wrong kit, you can always write to SOMM, SOMM at mtwwines.com, and we'll help you out. All right. I don't know, Evan, why my thing is not willing to turn today. All right, here we go. All right, Maddie, I think you're starting with wine number one.
I am, and I'm just heartened that I'm not the only human that has techno issues with regularity. So
oh my goodness.
I'm not happy about your difficulties, Li Meng. I'm just cheered up quietly.
Misery loves company.
You know, but cheers to everyone's good health as we are moving out of extraordinary times. You know, and let's hear it to fellowship and to Master the World that brings us together, and nobody's in the back of the room. Yay. So chin chin. All righty, I get wine number one. And per usual, overstating the obvious, white surface, looking at it against an angle. And this, for me, is just this beautiful, true yellow color with maybe a few green glints, but I'm working for them. You know, it's bright. How does it move in the glass? It's got some viscosity, some weight, and I'm going to discuss aroma and flavor together, but approaching it right away, I have to say that, and I have tasted it about half an hour ago, and I've let it warm up in the glass a little bit. The aromatic is very forthcoming, and it's the first blast I get is very pretty florals, whether you want to call them lemon blossom, apple blossom, lime blossom, and they seem absolutely fresh. And right underneath that, I get a nice classic ripe citrus, more Meyer lemon and key lime, you know, not so much tart as round and an illusion of sweetness. And then maybe some stone fruit like plums. And on the palate, the attack confirms whatever I smelled. And then very interesting mouthfeel on this wine, because on the first approach, what I get is mouthwatering acidity, but gently mouthwatering. It's not harsh or tart. I get a little bit of a phenolic impression, you know, rubbing my tongue against the roof of my mouth. And at the same time, the wine is mouth-filling and round. And I'm going to go back to it. A note to self, maybe it's a sommelier trick, but I always find the first approach to a wine is always the most aggressive. So I often like to check myself with the second approach quickly. So again, there's a strong florality in this wine. There's secondary flavors and fragrances that are coming through. Certainly the, you know, that beautiful term minerality, which I like to transition and call it more of a salinity or a wet rock character. And I would say some specific flavors of like chamomile and maybe a little bit of almond. And to remind us, when we get nuttiness, it can be an indication of oxidation or, you know, simply a little bit of bottle age. In this case, certainly the wine is super fresh. And I think, you know, there's definitely an impression of Lee's contact of this wine. I will tell you, I find the mouth feel on this wine so intriguing. It pulls my attention even more than the fragrance and flavor, because it's at once round, satiny, you know, gently phenolic, with sufficient plus acidity. It's delicious. There's an illusion of sweetness from ripe fruit. And if I were to go back to describing fragrance and flavors, certainly florals lead, followed by ripe citrus, followed by some stone fruit. Really pretty wine. And not to forget, a definite minerality, AKA whetstone character. It's at both mouth-filling and cleansing at the same time. It's very intriguing, and the finish is long, so high quality.
Excellent.
Are we going to
Oh,
our
I
next
think we're gonna
slide?
set up the poll, Andrea. Will you release
Oh,
the
yes.
first?
Yes.
Release the poll.
Oh, I should say, we're not in the habit of saying what we don't see, but I certainly don't, I'll say it out loud, get an impression of oak. I don't even get an impression of older oak on this wine. You know, it seems to be made in, you know, super neutral vessels. So what are our options here? Garganega. Sometimes I say our Garganega, but I think the Italians would correct me. Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Grigio. And, you know, Sauvignon Blanc is a highly aromatic grape variety. Pinot Grigio, Pinot Gris is not. And Garganega is probably, you know, if I were to put a label on it, maybe semi-aromatic. So just hold that thought. And then regionally, you've got a couple of old world options, France and Italy. And you can play with, you know, what you're placing where. And then New Zealand, which I think probably belongs enthusiastically to Sauvignon Blanc, and Oregon to Pinot Gris. By the way, the other is not just to fill in the blank. We really want to know, because we're trusting that you're honest with yourselves and with us. And if you're getting another impression, please communicate it in other, and then put it in the chat room in terms of what specifically you thought it was. One look at the label's worth $1,000. There's no dishonor in not getting it right, quote unquote. The methodology and the dialogue is the thing, right?
Absolutely. And Madeline, it's great listening to you talk about the wine. I don't have the wine today. This is so crazy. As somebody who touches all these bottles, I don't have the wine today, because in between all of the back and forths, I forgot to take one kit down for me. So that said, I find it very helpful. And for those of you out there who don't have the wine with you today, it's fun to guess along because you've given us a lot of clues. And I tell you guys to do it each month. There is always somebody without the wine. And it's fun to be able to guess along and say, okay, you said unoaked. All right, what kind of clues, what kind of markers am I getting? So we've got one person here who has boldly pronounced Chablis like.
Love it. Well,
Or Marsan Roussan. What do you think of those?
Yeah, that's very interesting because both of them could be unoaked Old World whites, right? Chablis would tend to have more, not compared to this wine, but compared to Marsan Roussan would have more poignant acidity. Good word, poignant, right? Where the acidity would be a little bit more compelling, and Marsan Roussan, it would be a little bit softer. But I love those options. I think Marsan Roussan would be harder to peg in a blind tasting than Chablis, but it could be me. Also, thank you for encouraging us to be complete in describing wines, Li Meng, because people should be able to listen to us and run a little deductive game. I think that's cool. So hopefully I did a reasonably good job for you.
Absolutely. Now let's see where people are. So you've got quite a bit of a split between Garganega and Pinot Grigio. So I do think that whatever we end up with, you'll need to explain the difference between Garganega and Pinot Grigio.
And Pinot Grigio, and also I think Sauvignon Blanc bears examination here because, obviously, over 20% of the people went there. So, people who have certain markers that they relate to with Sauvignon Blanc, be it grapefruit, be it grassy, they're getting those. So, there's no wrong in that. And then we have strong Old World, right?
Very strong Old World.
Very strong
When you add those up, it's at 85%. So I guess, Madeline, just to help people out, I mean, spoiler alert, it is likely Old World. How can we help those who thought that it was New World?
The whole issue of minerality or the whetstone or salinity or however you want to describe that, it's something that certainly isn't exclusive to the Old World, but I think is particularly poignant in this wine. And you kind of have to train yourself to pick it up because especially if other elements are strong, you have to sort of gently push those out of the way so that you can perceive it. And it's also, frankly, sometimes positively salty. But I think New World wines can certainly have that aspect, but in a classic example of an Old World type of wine, particularly one that's established, it'll be a little bit more of a leader.
Great. So let's see where we are.
Here we are, my favorite thing. Our seatbelts are on. Here we go.
I feel like I'm at Epcot.
Andrea taught me how to do this. I love it. And we are in northeastern Italy. We are in the Veneto. We are at a winery called Soave, and this is beautiful shot because you can see the hillsides that are really the punchline of the Soave Classico district, which is almost exclusively hillside vineyards. We are indeed a grape variety called Garganega, and this is a wonderful producer. Soave, there are other grape varieties that are allowable, notably, Chardonnay, Trebbiano de Soave, Pinot Bianco, but Soave specializes in clonal selection and monovarietal expression. So this is 100% Garganega. It is young 2019, but I love the fact that we're putting up the 18 would be acceptable because the wine is very forthcoming and actually complexity is showing in this wine, which is terrific. What else to tell you about this producer? Monte Carbonare is an actual hillside site. And it actually means coal in Italian, or refers to that. And it's referring very specifically to the black volcanic soil that is predominant on this site and in this specific area that produces a little bit more of an austere type of Soave as opposed to open and soft and gentle and round. And I think you can get, don't know as I would call this austere, but certainly the acidity and the combination of that and the minerality and the little phenolic component definitely gives this wine structure. This is a very cool producer that happens to be run by three, count them, women who are sisters. Their parents started the label in the 1980s, and before that they were selling their grapes to co-ops. Oh, can you go back to that previous slide, because it's a beautiful view of the hillsides in Soave that really
And
figure
I
big
have
time.
Soave basaltic soil
Oh,
over here in the
yay.
office.
Nice.
It is literally, I
And
mean,
it's black.
show and tell.
Hello.
We have this client, had this client a while ago, and they broke their soil into pieces to put into these beautiful jars. And this is their volcanic black soil.
Fantastic. So you are George to my Gracie or vice versa. I'm not really sure how that works, but to that point, merci for the visuals. Great optics.
Grazie, grazie.
Prego, prego. This is very interesting. So if some of you are having a little panic attack, if you're going for examination and you're wondering what are the aromatics and the specific flavor components of Garganica, I think this is a wine that's encouraging you, inviting you to pay close attention to it in terms of structure and mouthfeel and old world versus new world tags. I really do, because high quality Soave, there's a big difference between those expressions and commercial Soave. We go from the sublime to the ridiculous, and Garganica as a grape variety, if we're going to generalize, tends to be its big demerit is it's overproductive. So the best producers really control that, and the hillside vineyards help. It does have a thick skin, which protects itself from the mists that are floating around the valley. And this particular producer proudly claims, significant cold soak maceration, ergo, the phenolic component. In terms of separating it or distinguishing it in blind tastings from Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio. Let's address that briefly. If it's Alsace Pinot Gris, chances are it's going to be a lot softer and almost have an illusion of sweetness. And probably a little more color. But just to remind us all, Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio producers don't always go for, the copper hue. If you're from Northeastern Italy or from Oregon, I think you're going to have a little bit of a tighter, simpler structure, unless you're talking about the best Pinot Gris. So that would be a little tricky. If you manage to get, and this is from my heart, to Italy, unoaked, non-aromatic or semi-aromatic varietal, you're doing great. I tend to be the cheerleader for those of you who are going through the frightening process of identifying wines and blind tastings in front of other people. Do my colleagues want to say anything else?
No, Madeline, I was just going to ask, and I'm happy to answer it, but this is quote unquote your wine. Why in the picture that we're looking at right now is the person on the right-hand side reaching up to grab their grapes and not directly in front of them or from a kneeling position?
Oh, they seem to be, it's a little fuzzy, the picture to me, but these seem to be raised on pergolas. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Pergolas.
Exactly. Yep. Right. So that's why.
So pergolas for everybody there are basically very high things, and it keeps it closer to the sun. You can control the canopy there, but they used to be done historically because people would plant other crops on the underneath them, so you could maximize your vertical space along with your space on the ground. So they might have other vegetables, things like that. And if you jumped ahead to the other picture, yes, you have the three sisters, but I don't want to underscore, mom is a big presence there. I visited with the Tessere family before, and dad, who is outnumbered, because there's actually another sister who's not involved in the business too. I happened to be there on a Sunday dinner, and he was outnumbered 5-1. And so he's very quiet.
Rosetta is mom.
Yeah.
So, my parting shot on this wine, twofold. First of all, they call this earth in a glass proudly. So they're definitely focusing on the impression of the volcanic impact on the wine, but don't forget the range of quality and styles in Soave. We have upwards of 60 crus that have been identified, and many sub-districts. So who makes it, where it's made, will very much impact not just the style, but the quality of the wine. And I think this is a beautiful expression. Do you like it, Tim?
I love it. Yeah, and good point, Maddie, because Soave for quality is all over the map. And you mentioned that, this is made in the Classico zone. And Soave DOC, there's an ocean of it, and it's made in flatlands, an endless expanse of flat vineyards, and the yields are high, and the plants are overcropped. And so this is a great example of a wine from a cru from a great producer. It's beautiful wine.
Thank you for selecting it, Evan. Yay.
I also want to just remind everyone, since you are looking for markers, when you go through a tasting like this, you may not be looking at the full grid where we have a panel tasting and writing tasting notes and marker notes. So if you use a QR code that came with your box, or if you just type in 129A when you go to start tasting on our website, you can actually find a tasting note with the markers that you can taste along to refresh, seal up what you've got left. Lisa, who was saying that she wants to get the difference between this and Chablis, get another bottle of Chablis and try it with that tasting note. It might really help.
And get a bottle of Pinot Grigio and taste all three of them.
Yeah. Or the next one could be Pinot Grigio. Who knows?
There you
Wine
go.
number 2.
There you
Evan.
go. Well, if you look at the wine right off the bat, you're going to probably know that it is not Pinot Grigio. This is going to be a fun wine, and I'm actually going to echo back a little bit to Madeline's wine, the first one, just because some of the juxtaposition differences here are so acute. So right off the bat, they're both, particularly compared to wine 3, reasonably rich in pigment. I find this wine to have a little bit more of a golden or brassy hue to it, whereas the first one, to Madeline's point, was more of a classic yellow. It has a fairly good amount of concentration and a paleness of color. And that depth of color could be age, it could be oak, or it could be grape variety. And the grape variety probably in the contact at some level with skin contact here. We won't know that until we get it right off the bat later on, but right off the bat, know that it has a fairly extracted color. I'm not seeing any real green glints today on this wine, but I am getting some concentration. And when I swirl it, for those of you who are tier people, leg people, it's got a moderate tiering, relatively fat tiering, and relatively moderate to slow. I'm getting a good amount of secondary tiering, so I suggest it's a wine of some volume. In the nose, and again, I will, like Madeline, conflate the nose and mouth together. But right off the bat, I am getting really rich fruit, which I'll go into in a minute. But I am also getting a clear presence of oak. And the oak here is coming across in that sort of nutty, praline, vanilla, baking spice vein. If you go back and smell Madeline's wine 1 for a minute, you ain't got any of that there. So right off the bat, the oak is a clear intention and choice for either the grape style or whatever. If you peel back that oak, which is so predominant, though, there is a core of brilliant fruit there. And the fruit is all on a fairly ripe spectrum. It's a combination of riper citrus fruit for sure, but here I think more of the tree fruit and the orchard fruit dominate. So I'm getting pears and apples, yellows and reds, but I'm also getting more of that sort of like pear pie, apple pie, that sort of thing that combines crust, if you will, which also is a reflection of oak, I might add, and baking spice, but also in concert with fruit. It's almost, if you really struggle hard or look hard with a bit of intent, it's almost applesaucey in its own sort of way. Okay. Are there other fruits there in the tropical side? Maybe a bit of melon or something like that, but nothing really pronounced. No pineapples, guavas, or anything of that genre. Certainly nothing super vegetal about this, although some people might argue that there's almost that essence. If you happen to, as I do, look forward to summer and you get that first summer corn and the sweetness, if you happen to be by a farm where they have you pick, and whether it's white or yellow, you get sort of almost a sweetness of that flavor there. I pick up a note of that as well too. Maybe a little bit of white mushrooms, maybe a kiss of ginger root or something like that. On the herbal side, maybe a bit of verbena, maybe a bit of sorrel, picking up a little bit on the acid there. Again, some nuttiness, maybe for those people who are fans of sesame seeds and stuff like that. If you're familiar with a candy called halava, this smells a little bit like halava. And then as we move towards earth, nothing particularly earthy here. It's really this sort of tango of winemaking skills and really ripe fruit, but nothing particularly forefront on the earth thing. As far as the mouth goes, The wine has a fairly voluminous attack. It pretty much echoes everything that I smelled before. The texture is quite round, quite creamy, and I am picking up a buttery note, sort of like a buttered popcorn note that I didn't really get in the nose of the wine, but it's clearly pronounced in the palate of the wine. And I am getting a nice balanced finish. It's long, it's got acid, acidic, but not Hasidic as we go into Passover. And nevertheless, still long on the palate. I think it's extremely well made, and I believe it to be a very good example of what it is.
All right, so let's see if we can
Get some choices here.
get some choices on here.
So it's an interesting set of varieties. And then obviously, as Madeline pointed before, you have to connect the dots against your old world and new world choices. But Torrentes, for those of you who have been familiar with it before, is an old Criolla grape that comes from Spain and the Canary Islands originally, primarily found these days in South America and primarily in Argentina. Very aromatic, very floral, very tropical by nature. Chardonnay, we all know Chardonnay can come in many shapes and sizes, depending on what the winemaker wants to do. Pinot Blanc can be a relatively neutral grape type, but again, depending on how you vinify it, it's going to give you a lot. It tends to be a little bit more pure in its ripeness, and very much almost like, dare I say, plain yogurt or creme fraiche or something like that, in a simple purity of flavor. And then obviously you have France and Austria for some varieties there. You have California and Argentina for others.
Now, Evan, there's a good question here from Colleen. How would you rate the acid and the alcohol levels on this wine?
Hey, Colleen. I would rate the acid level here as being, I would say moderate to moderate plus. I wouldn't go any higher than moderate plus, and I certainly wouldn't go any lower than moderate. And it depends, again, acid levels are picked up differently by everybody's mouth. And if you were eating versus drinking the wine pure and all those other things. I think that the wine's acid has been a tad softened, I believe, with age in this wine, reflected both in the color and the softness of the acid. The alcohol here is reasonably ample. My chest cavity is a tad warm right now. Certainly the texture on this wine pushes somewhere between half and half in cream, as opposed to, say, non-fat milk, or even 2% milk, which a lower alcohol wine would give you.
And for those of you who are with us for the first time, I see some new names. You can rip off the sleeve, and the alcohol content is on the back label as well. So besides going onto our grid, you have something very physical without going online that you could take a look at to see what the alcohol level is. But any one of these guys will tell you the alcohol label is just a label. It's really the true perception that you're tasting in your mouth that really matters.
Yeah, and as a reminder, legally, you have wiggle room within that going down or going up, because at the time somebody reports the alcohol to the government when they have to do it there, those things are known because of evaporation and other stuff, if wines are still in barrel, to change over time. But it looks like there's a pretty clear proverbial winner here, huh?
Yes, absolutely. I think that people are really thinking that this is Chardonnay. So which builds our point, when you have these two white wines to compare between Garganega and Chardonnay, if that is indeed what it is, you really have a good, strong comparison here. And where everybody was very much in the old world with the last wine, people are very much, 93% are in the new world.
36% in Argentina. How cool is that?
Yeah, well, but and although maybe the number of votes for Torrentes is low, I think it speaks volumes to what's going on in Chardonnay in Argentina these days, which is far from the sort of generic stuff of not too long ago, and now much more site specific and much more correctly balanced and vinified. So Argentinian Chardonnay is not an awful call.
Yeah,
if that's where it happened to be from.
So let's go. Let's see.
All right, I got my seatbelt back on. Here we are, spinning in the world, and we are in North America. We are here in California. We are in the Napa Valley, but that's a bit of a deceptive term here because although this particular winery, which you can see, Amici, is located up towards Calistoga in the Napa Valley, the fruit from this is going to come from elsewhere, which does speak to the fact that in many parts of the world where wineries are and where the fruit source may come from that is then brought to the winery to vinify may not necessarily be proverbially estate bottled, of which this wine isn't. But the Amici people do a great job. As you can see here, as we just said, the winery is in Napa Valley, but the wines here, the grapes here are coming from the Sonoma Coast. Now, Sonoma Coast is a broad term, and you'll often hear people talk about it in terms of being quote unquote, the true Sonoma Coast versus the larger Sonoma Coast, because the larger Sonoma Coast not only encompasses what people now consider to be the West Sonoma Coast and Fort Ross Seaview and Annapolis and all that stuff there, but it actually incorporates the Russian River, it actually incorporates Carneros, and it actually incorporates even parts of Sonoma Valley, which is also incorporated by Carneros. So this particular wine from Amici, as I said before, the winery is located up in Napa Valley, which makes sense when you think of the fact that when the winery started, they were really known for their Cabernet, and really to the day still are known as a Cabernet specialist. If you look on their website, you'll note that every renowned winery, vineyard for Cabernet of any notoriety in Napa Valley, they bottle separately, but they also have over time diversified. And I actually think they're doing an amazing job with Chardonnay. And if you can get a bottle of either their Heinz Vineyard or their Hyde Vineyard or their El Diablo Vineyard Chardonnays too, those are really worth checking out. And I think we'll take one from thinking of them as being a mono variety, monodimensional winery into being much more diversified there. Here's a couple of their vineyards in Napa Valley. I don't believe these to be Sonoma Coast vineyards. And you see the team of winemakers there. Tony on the far right is the lead wine guy there. John and Bob help him out. And there's even a new young guy on the team that I noted when I looked to the website. What's important here, and really one of the reasons why I wanted to show people this is, number one, I don't want people to think that, you know, when a Chardonnay is well made, and this is a well-made Chardonnay that speaks very much to the generosity of a wine that is of quote unquote Sonoma Coast. So clearly there's Russian River fruit here, more middle reach fruit, which is giving you sort of that weight in the palate. There is brightness and precision complexities of stuff that's coming more coastal, and then sort of all put together to sort of represent what is really good Sonoma Coast all about as interpreted by a team of solid winemakers. So this wine, and by the way, 18 was a lovely vintage up there, is a full-on classic. So this is 100% malolactic fermentation, which for those of you who are going, well, duh, it's buttered popcorn, Evan. That's probably why the diacetyl effect is there. It is full barrel fermentation, so none of this has spent any time in stainless steel and then blended with oak-aged wine to preserve acidity or whatever. But of that oak, all of which is French, only about 40% of it is new. So it really is going to give you sort of great balance. Again, sort of that lovely pineapple or pear pie, or maybe arguably even peach pie type characters, along with this sort of, again, crusty, pie crusty thing, a little bit of toast. I find, as I said before, notes of praline, notes of sesame seeds and halva candy and all that in there, just really rolled up into a lovely package.
All right, so I don't want us to run out of time, but this is a very good question and I want to throw it out there. Thank you for picking something very classic, Evan. What are the key markers between Napa Chardonnay and Sonoma Coast Chardonnay, do you think?
Oh, that's a tough question because it's so hard to wrap them up both up. In Napa, you really have Chardonnay in two places, most notably in the southern part of Napa Valley, Carneros probably being the most highly considered place for Chardonnay. Those tend to be sort of bright and very tropical by nature, with again, strong notes of tree fruit. Those that come from the hillsides, up high in the mountains, Spring Mountain area, over by where places like Stony Hill are, Diamond Mountain area and things like that. Those of high altitude tend to be a little bit more like what I would associate with Sonoma County and the Sonoma coast in terms of their leaner in structure, brighter in acid, and lower in oak content. Sonoma County is a big one though, because it could be the coast, it could be the Russian River, it could be Chalk Hill, it could be Alexander Valley. So it's very hard to wrap your arms around it. Sonoma coast for me will always be defined more by having slightly more shrill levels of acidity, based on the fact that the closer to the water you get, the less ripe the fruit, the higher the acid levels, and generally more use of older oak on the true coast. Once you get into something that's more quote unquote Sonoma coast overall, representing the greater area, I would expect some wood, I would expect some generosity, and I would expect more ripeness.
Great, thank you. All right. Now we're gonna go on to Tim. Wine number 3. Exciting to have you lead a wine now.
Okay, thanks, Li Bing. Everybody, as they see on TV, now for something completely different. Just from color alone, you take a look at the color of the 3 white wines, and wine number 3 has the lightest color of our. And so if we take a look at 2, the use of oak and a little bit of age gave it a deeper color, and the skin contact that Maddie talked about gave wine number 1 deeper color. So this wine, whatever it is, lacks all of those things, and we're about to find out why. Okay, in terms of questions considered, would you describe this wine as dry or fruity? Well, a wine can be both, because dry is residual sugar or lack thereof, and fruit can be in a completely dry wine. Does the wine smell like flowers or fruit or all those things? We're going to discover that momentarily. And then in terms of the texture, we'll have to taste this wine, but I think it will be intriguing and delightful. I'll just describe it as that. All right, so everybody starting from the top. This is a straw color. It's not gold, it's not yellow. There's definitely glints of green and even silver unpolished brass, speaking to a young wine and also wine made from grapes in a cool climate. What else can we say about it? Well, if you do swirl the glass, so you tilt it and roll it, it's like the tears legs, or whatever you want to call them, are missing in action. What does that mean? Very curious. We're going to find out. All right, on the nose and the palate, it's a veritable cornucopia of fruit. And right off the bat, I can discover 3 or 4 out of the 5 fruit groups for white wines / grapes. And those are orchard fruit that Evan mentioned, apple and pear. You've got citrus fruit, which could be sweet or tart. You've got tropical fruit, and then you've got stone fruit, peach, apricot, nectarine, and then you've got things like green melon. For me, I get 4 out of those 5. And for me, that's a huge tip. That's like the alarms going off, because I think of 2 grapes immediately. Okay, and we'll talk about that at the end. We'll figure out which one it is. And so in terms of apple and pear, I get really underripe green pear, green apple, maybe some quince, fresh and ripe and tart. What else? We get white peaches, white nectarines. Again, just this side of ripeness, but very fresh. Pineapple, kiwi, yuzu, things like that, things that are tropical and green and very aromatic, but still acidic. And then what else does that leave? Well, the citrus, which to me is kind of a combo platter of sweet citrus like tangerines, mandarins, pink grapefruit, key limes, and then lemon. There's a sour core to the wine on the palate. And then could be a little green melon. So notice 4 categories of fruit. In terms of non-fruit here, it is quite floral. There is citrus blossom, green apple blossom, a little bit of honeysuckle. There's also a little bit of honey too. Very little in the way of herbal qualities, maybe a little verbena, and maybe a little ginger root as well. In terms of earth and mineral, predominantly it's mineral driven, and it's very mineral. I would call it slaty. And there's a little bit of fusel character, that TDN, that long chemical compound that I won't bore you with. There's a complete lack of oak. And everybody, this is great, because we have now that Amici Chardonnay, and now you can go back to it and smell it and say, oh my God, yes, this has oak. It also has malolactic, and the alcohol is higher, and there's no mineral whatsoever. It's great. I'm glad we positioned that wine right between 1 and 3. Okay, and then as your attorney, I think you should take a sip. And I'm not going to spit it out this time, because this is delicious. Mm. Oh my goodness. That is wonderful. Okay, so the first thing that probably set everybody's alarms off is that there's residual sugar. This wine is slightly sweet. Off-dried is slightly sweet. Okay, so that begins to start your, your hard drive spinning and trying to come up with wines in your database that have residual sugar. Okay, curious thing about this, and I'm going to go ahead to the structure. And when I check for alcohol, I'm going to do this so I can demonstrate, and mainly because I want another sip of the wine.
Greedy.
Take a sip of the wine, swallow it, and then say, oh, and inhale. And usually you'll get heat depending on how much alcohol. If you do that with a Chardonnay that's over 14, you're going to get heat down here. This, un poquito, almost nothing. Very curious. And as a result, that means the grapes didn't get ripe. Or if they did get ripe, it wasn't fermented to dryness. And we know that because there's residual sugar. Notice what your salivary glands are doing. They're almost freaking out. So the acid is high, right? Or very close to it. And I can feel it on the enamel of my front teeth. Low alcohol, high acid, residual sugar. Those things go hand in hand. I will also tell you very quickly that acid and sugar do this dance. They actually buffer each other. And I wouldn't be surprised if this wine is sweeter than we think and has higher acid than we think. Okay, what else? Any winemaking involved? No, none at all. I think this wine went through a primary fermentation. I don't think it went through malolactic whatsoever. There is a tiny bit of lees contact that has some richness, but it's really a minor facet to the wine. So you've got a very pure expression of a grape and a place. Okay, with that, let's have the poll, please.
I gotta say, sometimes you gotta live in somebody else's shoes, right? I am living in the shoe of the person who doesn't have the wine, and you are an amazing teacher. Those descriptions, I feel like I tasted it. Amazing.
Yeah.
All right,
okay.
So grape variety, Gewürztraminer, Muscat, Riesling, holy moly. I think you dropped so many hints along the way. That was amazing.
Yeah.
And of course,
Yeah.
if you didn't think it was any of these, let us know where you think what it is. And guessing the variety here, Tim, I'm guessing will help somebody think of the region as well.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to say anything about the other grapes now, or wait until we get the envelope?
I think that given where I'm seeing where people are on the polls, I don't think that we need to go into a lot of time on the grapes. Maybe let's find out what they are, and then we can talk about differences, what made it so strong. Let me share the results, and we can use the results as a good discussion point. All right, so here we are. You can see that Riesling has 79%, and Gewürztraminer at 14%, and Muscat at 7%. So it is definitely going to be helpful to sort of help people understand, how is it more Riesling or not than the others. And then I think because of what people have chosen here, we do see, not such a clear cut like the first two wines, 64% on Old World versus 36% New World. I think maybe let's spend more time on Old versus New World.
Okay. All right. So just to, very quickly to talk about Gewürztraminer and Muscat, they're kind of in the same tribe. They're fully aromatic grapes. They're very floral, a lot of terpenes, and a lot of phenolic bitterness for both of them. And odds are, especially with a quality Gewürztraminer, probably from Alsace, elevated alcohol, at least 13, maybe higher, a lot of phenolic bitterness, and just a much, much richer wine. And odds are a little bit of residual sugar. Muscat, if it's from Alsace, very similar in style, usually dry, usually slightly higher in acid than Gewürztraminer. Okay, so we're going to rule those out because that's definitely a distinct tribe. In terms of getting down there to New World and Australia, not a bad call, because again, it's one of the outliers. We all talk about forever and a day, Old World mineral, New World not. Well, obviously, Clare and Eden Valley Riesling, huge, exception to the rule. But here you've got wines that are 12 to 13% in alcohol. They are bone dry, high acid, and really distinct. This wine is Hello Kitty by comparison. It's like a really soft comforter. And it's like, again, really low alcohol. As a matter of fact, 8.5%, I think is the number on the bottle. And residual sugar and a lot of different kinds of fruit. So yeah, Germany by far best call here. Okay.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
let's take a little trip.
Absolutely. Here we go. Of course. Here we go. All right. Moving from California, you can see that we're going to Germany.
And really one of the most beautiful places in the world for wine, in the Middle Mosel Valley. And that is Dr. Lozen. And right across the village of Valen is on your right. And Dr. Lozen has been a family-owned estate in Germany in the Mosel for over 200 years. And Ernst Lozen, or Ernie as we like to call him, has been running the family estate since 1988. They make Rieslings from 9 different vineyards in the Mosel. 7 of them are Grand Cru quality. And if you multiply 9 different vineyards times 6 predicates, you can see how many wines they make in every year. And plus they'll make multiples of Auslese. So in any given year, Ernie is submitting 70 to 80 different wines to be approved by not only the German government, but the VDP, the Growers Association. And this particular one is one of definitely the Grand Crus of the Middle Mosel. And we should go to the next slide because I get dangerously excited looking at this picture. I've seen this vineyard 4 times, the Erziger Wirtsgarten. So a little crash course. Erzig is the village, and you're looking at it right there. In fact, the townhouse, the huge townhouse on the right is the home of another producer, Robert Eimal of Münchow, who's also a fantastic producer. So that is the Wirtsgarten, Spice Garden. Notice the color. It's red slate and sandstone, which is very unique for the Mosel because everything around it is either blue or gray slate. And in fact, the picture on the right, that's the village of Erzig. They add ER to Erzig, like we say New Yorkers are from New York. And Wirtsgarten, of course, is the name of the vineyard. This is a Spätlese, which means it's late harvest, slightly sweet in style. You might think this is a delicate wine, but these wines age like you cannot believe. So, you know, Evan and Madeline, do you know who stayed with us here at the house last Friday night, week ago?
Ernie?
Paul Wagner.
Oh,
Paul Wagner and his wife, Margaret. So they were coming to the state and they stayed with us and we made them dinner. And I pulled out a bottle of 2001 Erdner Prelat from Dr. Efflein's Prüm. So the Erdner Prelat literally is off to the right of the first photograph. It's the next vineyard over. And in 2001, the wine's 21 years old and it was superb and still young. So these wines age incredibly well. And this is probably Mosel Spätlese could be my favorite food white wine. I love these wines.
I have a question for my great friend, the great educator. And also I just want to tell everyone, Paul Wagner is a dear friend of Tim's and also, you know, cosmic class wine professional who is in, I can't even say semi-retirement because he's traveling so much, but just in case you haven't heard his name. May I ask my question though? Because
Sure,
I think this is really important for blind tasting and everybody, not just the red soil, look at the grade of that slope. Hello.
Yeah.
There are no little machines going up and down there.
Yeah,
but
the oldest part of the vineyard, which is well over 130 years old, is a 70-degree slope.
whoa.
And the only way to work it is on your hands and knees. And believe it or not, most of the vineyard work in the Mosel is done by women. Women from Poland or the Czech Republic. And I've been there in the spring when they were spraying, you know, SO2 in water, liquid form, and they literally use bungee cords that are about 30 feet long, and they tie themselves off and they lower themselves down and spray the vines. It's incredibly difficult and dangerous work.
To do. My question is this, especially, oh, there's Ernie, and this
Ernie.
is not a glamour shot. This is Ernie. You know,
No, that's Ernie.
he's exuberant. When people
Make it in.
perceive TDN, is that a thank you God moment because it can only be Riesling,
Yes.
or are there other grape varieties that will display it? If you could touch on that.
No, it pairs in Riesling more often than not, especially Rieslings Australian Rieslings where you've got a warmer, shorter growing cycle and more sunlight. In German Rieslings, it's, it's not that consistent. You do find it, especially as the wines get old, but if you've got a warmer vintage, odds are you're going to find it.
So
like
TDN
2019.
Riesling, they're right.
Yeah. That's definitely an impact compound for a Riesling. Yeah.
And also, it should be brought up that the which may say the discrepancy we had between people picking Germany and people picking Australia. Yes, two homes for great Riesling, but
Yeah.
Australian Rieslings, and correct me, Tim, if I'm wrong, otherwise, 98% of them are really bone dry, whereas the German
Yes.
ones, you have this sort of sugar skin.
Yes, I got in big trouble once for suggesting they leave a little residual sugar. This was a panel of like 6 winemakers in the Clare Valley, and none of them would sit at my table for lunch.
The Aussies can use choice language too, so I bet some of that was
can they?
floating your way.
Yeah.
Yes.
But
Sure
those
they
wines
can.
too age really well, because the oldest Australian white wine I've ever had was from Yalumba, and it was Eden Valley Riesling under screw cap, vintage 1941.
Wow.
So, and I tasted this in 2010. So yeah.
I still have some
Incredible.
2002 Australian Rieslings, Napstein, and a couple of other producers in my cellar, and they're still very much alive.
Yeah.
Let's all know whose houses to go for dinner, apparently,
Yeah.
right? All right, you guys, we got to keep on time here. Wine number 4,
Okay.
Jeff.
All right. So moving to the first of the 3 red wines. And the question is the wine see-through or opaque? And what does that suggest? Okay. So in other words, if you hold it over some written notes, can you see through it and read through it? So that speaks to, to certain kinds of grapes that are thinner skinned, lighter pigmented versus thicker skinned, more deeply pigmented. And those are different universes of red grapes and wines. Next, how do you describe the effect of oak barrels in red wine's aroma? Well, oak, of course, gives wines a subset of different aromas and flavors, like vanilla from the vanilla, and then all the spices and everything from toasting the barrels, and then a whole host of things like tea, coffee, bitter chocolate, cocoa powder, this American oak, coconut, dill, vanilla, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And then finally, the tannins, are they harsh or pleasantly drying? And that's all about the finish. And we'll find that out pretty quickly. Okay. But let's do the wine. All right. So this wine is, to me, very deeply colored. It's almost opaque. I can't read through it. And I would say this is a deep ruby, but there is some garnet in this. So there's some evolution here. So the wine's got some age. Notice that the color lightens up, the rim variation thing, and it's a much more evolved color. So it's definitely a garnet. So this wine, one of two things: it's seen some time in oak, or it's older, or maybe both. Okay. And then on the nose, well, my suspicion is correct on both counts, because I'm getting a mix of different qualities of fruit. So there's definitely red fruit, and there's black fruit, and there's some dried fruit, like there's a little bit of raisin and prune. But again, there's raisinated red fruit like craisins, cranberries. There's sour cherries and like dried red plums. There's black plums too, and blackberries. And again, the condition for all that fruit is a combination of ripe and then dried and then almost stewed. So again, that speaks to the age of the wine. And then once you get beyond the fruit, there's a lot of other things. So there is a dried floral. Now, I want to mention something that's important just to connect the dots. We're building the case for this wine having either been in oak for a while, or it's old, or both. And I'm thinking it's both. But that means the entire arc of the wine, everything you're going to talk about, has to do with evolution, right? So the flowers here are dry. There's dried potpourri, there's dried rose petals. There's almost like a sun-baked terracotta clay to it, but there's a lot of herbal things, very savory herbs to it. It reminds me of dried bay leaves, dried sorrel. There's a mushroomy earth quality, but there's a chalky, dusty, like dust quality. And then there's quite a bit of oak in here, and it's a whole panoply of different spices. It is smoke, it's toast. It reminds me of coffee, freshly brewed coffee. And what else? There's also some leather. So, again, oak, older oak. And it's really quite earthy. Okay, that's a lot. And then on the palate. All right, what's surprising, and everybody's tasting this for the first time, it's almost shocking, is how tart the wine turns in the mouth. So it's very deceptive. We get all these ripe, raisinated, cooked aromas on the nose, and then you get it in the mouth, and all of a sudden everything turns sour. So there's some stewy, raisiny, pruny fruit to it, but the black and red fruit suddenly turns like dried and sour. It's very sour, very even more herbal in the palate, very dusty, mushroomy, earthy. What else? And then there's a lot of oak, especially on the finish. And so everybody take a taste again, because we're going to do the structure quickly. Because I always say, if you're going to assess the structure, retaste it, wait 3 to 5 seconds, because it's usually delayed response. Wow. Sour glands, medium plus. Alcohol, fairly high, probably high 13s or right around 14, maybe just over 14, because I can feel it right here. And then finally, the tannin, is considerable. It's medium plus plus, but here again, I think combination of how the oak was treated, so maybe a mixture of used and new oak, but also the age of the wine, is that the tannins are fine, but there's a lot of tannin here. Not a lot of grape tannin. Notice in the front of the mouth, a lot of tannin on the sides and the back, and most of that is oak tannin. Okay. All right. Did we miss anything? Long finished, very complex wine. This is a wine that I would say decant it, enjoy it over a couple hours. Okay. All right.
Fabulous.
So here are your choices.
So you've got your Sangiovese or blend, Cabernet Franc, Tempranillo, and as always, if you were thinking of something completely different, please put it in the chat and let us know. And let's see where people end up. I'm actually going to close this poll really fast because we got to keep moving. So for those of you, I didn't say it yet until wine number 4. It is anonymous. So don't think too hard. Whatever pops into your head, just let it out and let us know what you're thinking. And it will help Tim define how he should explain this wine as we reveal.
Okay.
So I'm going to shut this down. Let's go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I see about 55%. What happened to the other 45% of you guys? Don't be nervous. Just do it. All right, Tim,
Okay.
here's what you got. Holy moly.
Yeah. All right. So everybody, with the first 2 wines, you've got major markers for them. You've got impact compounds. The second wine, Cabernet Franc, this wine is really earthy, and Cabernet Franc of this quality, probably Loire Valley, and there's no grain, herbal, vegetable notes. There's no pyrazines. So Cabernet Franc is gone. Sangiovese blend would be more predominantly red fruit, and the acid would be much higher, believe it or not. And then there would be tannins, because Sangiovese has grape tannins, right? So those things are missing. And finally, so that leaves us with Tempranillo blend. Okay. And that should take us to España. So let's see what we have.
All right. We're definitely firmly in the old world. 80% of folks thought that we were in the old world. So that's exciting.
Yep.
All right. So here's where we are. Let's see if we're right here.
Baronia. And so we are in Rioja. And Baronia, believe it or not, is a Celtic name, because the Celts originally settled this area over 1,000 years ago. Those pesky Celts ended up everywhere. All right, so Baronia, in the context of producers, really good producers in Rioja, Baronia was founded in 1973. They're a newcomer. They were acquired by González Bies in 1982, and so they own about 20 hectares of vineyards. They contract with about 800 more. This is their Gran Reserva in 2012, and I think it's gorgeous wine. What makes the wine a little bit more to identify is a wine like this is traditionally done in American oak, and Baronia uses 100% French oak. So it makes it a little bit more to figure out. I think just a great example. So comments might distinguished qualities.
You
What
could
do
have
think?
fooled me on 100% French oak. I mean, I'm hearing
Yeah.
you. I believe you,
Yeah.
but I smell a sweetness to the oak that, sometimes what they do and what they tell us are not always the same thing.
Well,
But,
that's true.
you have an acute nose and you're a great describer, but I was simply going
Yeah.
to say, taking it down to simplicity, especially if you get confused, that combination of bottle and barrel age and dominant oak and all those beautiful dried elements, both in earth and
Yeah.
fruit, Rioja should be a strong consideration.
Yeah, and maybe I'd have to agree because having been there, and the same holds true for Navarra, you see the bodega, I mean, it's this immense places and they make so much wine, the big producers, and you see French and oak barrels like mixed in.
Yeah.
So it's just like, well, okay.
But
Evan, you were gonna say
everybody,
something?
a PS to that, not only what they say and what they do, I'm not saying anybody lies, but it's not uncommon for a tech sheet to say something and the winemaker to be talking to you going, I didn't really do that, So I think all the more reason why paying very close attention to the wine and describing it as fully and completely, though I'm going to have to take another life to describe wine as fully as Tim does.
Evan, I think, was trying to jump in. Evan, go.
No, I was just simply going to speak to the fact that one of the beautiful things in life about Gran Reserva Rioja is that by definition, by law, they have to have ample barrel age and ample bottle age before they're allowed to even be released. What that does by definition is force any winemaker to think about, if my wine has spent this much time in barrel, will it be over oaked or not? And then if I have to put it in bottle for several years, how is it going to hold up at the end? So when wines carry a Gran Reserva on the label, not only are they by definition the top wines of a particular bodega, but it's kind of like making a tête de cuvée champagne and charging a ridiculous amount of money for it. If it's not good, nobody's going to buy it ever again, and they're going to rag on you in the world of the people we live with. And the same thing's true of Gran Reserva Rioja. And I think if you do the math, by the time you look at how much these wines cost to pick the best grapes, barrel age them for a long time, and then bottle age them for a long time, they're among some of the greatest values for the money in the world when you think of the cost of inventory, cost of grapes and such. And I love the fact that when they're released, they're already ready to drink. They will continue to get better. And they show this wonderful combination of vinosity and quality fruit / freshness in the same bottle at the same
For $30 a bottle,
Yeah, that's
suggested
extraordinary.
retail. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I think a couple of questions. Evan, great choice, Evan. Evan always does such a great job of selecting the wines. And I think that's brilliant for those of you who are studying here. Obviously, that's why we're all learners of this wonderful product that he's got here at 2012. So you could really understand vintage as you go through our kits. Any of you can take this question. Lisa says she was thinking of a Barolo or an Amarone, two very different grapes. Probably part of the confusion, Tim, why people were in Italy too. She was thinking of those until she saw the options, and neither one of those were on the options. So how would you distinguish these other Italian grapes from this Tempranillo?
Well, first of all, any wine from Nebbiolo is going to be so much more tannic than this, and it's not going to have as much color. Barolo, especially even from a Cru, one of the really good vineyards, is not going to have the depth of color of this, but also it's going to have high acid, high tannin, and probably high alcohol. And it's going to be very dry. It's not going to be subtle. It's going to be what I call grown-up drink. And then in terms of Amarone is going to have 15% alcohol minimum because it's made from dried grapes. It's going to have just a lot of raisinated fruit, probably a lot of volatile acidity, which smells like balsamic vinegar, and it could even have a touch of sweetness. But it's just bitter. It's just a huge raisinated wine that's one of a kind. So both of those are just more extreme wines than this, I guess.
I like to overstate the obvious again. Tim mentioned raisinated fruit. He means actual raisinated fruit, as opposed to, we can talk about when we're blind tasting a raisinated or a dried impression, but in Amarone, they're actually drying the grapes. So, you know, just a thought.
One last question and then we move on and we'll have to move quickly. Tannins, how would you distinguish, this is definitely a question for Tim, how would you distinguish the tannins from oak versus the tannins from grape?
Okay, well, that's, you know, I can only say this is the way I do it. I think it varies from person to person, but generally speaking, for me and what I found in some other people is that grape tannins are in the front of the mouth, oak tannins in the back. And if you get a wine that's really tannic, like a Barolo, it's tannic everywhere.
Great, thank you. I love
Sure.
this last comment on chat here when Nicole said she had to go grab a piece of cheese. I love that. I love that. All right. Wine number 5, I believe. Oh, I should keep going on this very quickly just to show the very modern,
Yes.
and beautiful winery.
Amazing winery.
Living
And,
roof.
you know, they're almost carbon neutral. They have so much, they've done so much with green, both in the vineyards and the winery. It's pretty amazing.
Winemaker here.
Here's Matthias. Yep.
Awesome. All right. Wine number 5, Evan.
All right. And we're going to right off the bat, when you look at this wine, and I think one of the big things that's nice about today's tasting, it's not always the case, is there are some very differentiating realities between hues, intensities of color, et cetera, as we move from older wines to younger wine, different grape varieties that have more pigmentation versus others. And right off the bat, this wine shows much greater volume of color and a much more youthful color too. So if you look at them side by side, I would like being able to do this. This wine is far more, dare I say, purpley by nature, both in the core of the wine and certainly at the edge of the wine. And that garnet color that Tim pointed out, garnet is sort of the middle aging of wine, sort of like, you know, people at my age, we get more gray around our temples and all that. Wines certainly get a little bit more developed and oranged towards the edge, whereas this wine has just got a deepness and an intensity and, like I said, purpley color there. It's also got a lot of pigmentation. When you swirl it around in the glass, you'll notice that there's a sheen of this sort of lighter purple that stains the inside of the glass, and the tears themselves, depending if you hold it to a piece of paper, actually are a little bit pink too. Therefore, we're suggesting a good amount of volume to the concentration of this wine. Not undifferent, albeit in a white format to what we had on my previous wine number 2. So let's give this one a sniff and a taste. Right off the bat, I am getting a lot of ripeness in this wine, and the nature of the fruit here, which is a combination of both red and black fruits, probably leans heavier towards the black here, although there are certainly strong undernotes of very ripe raspberry, a very ripe cherry, and a very ripe red plum, in addition to the black plum, the black cherry, the black berries that are there. I find them to be fresh by definition. There is maybe just a touch of age or dryness to them, but they tend to be very, very fresh, and once again, voluminous by nature. I am getting other flavors here that are certainly not fruit, and those would include sort of greener flavors. I sort of put a catch-all of what I just call sort of leafy greens, which could be chard, collard greens, mustard greens, all of that together. You sort of pick up that kind of generic greenness to it. I'm also picking up elements of floral characters. A certain amount of lavender particularly jumps out in this wine, maybe a kiss of lilac and maybe a hint of rose petals, both here primarily fresh, but a little bit of dried as well. I'm certainly picking up notes of fennel for sure, and perhaps a little bit of beetroot underneath. And then as I move myself off into the world of herbs, I'm picking up on sort of that kind of wonderful, what I would describe as sort of an underbrushy character to it, which is a little bit of herbs, a little bit of just local vegetation and all of that. The French refer to that as sort of a garrigue character, but you can smell it when you walk into a field and get near some brush and stuff like that. That's a combination of wildflowers and sorts of other things here. I'm picking up a little bit of tobacco leaf. I'm picking up a little bit of sage, but just some generally leafier things. And then beyond that, I am picking up other notes. So a bit of pepperiness here, and I'm getting a combination of sort of like green peppercorn and some black pepper here, but there is an overall pungency and a piquance of spiciness. I'm also picking up maybe a little bit of, I didn't point it out before in my discussion of greens, but a little bit of chicory for those of you who spent way too much time at Café du Monde down in New Orleans, and you know what that does to your coffee. It can do the same thing in wines. And then nothing to really speak of in terms of oak. If there's oak here, it's older oak or larger oak or combination thereof. Other elements there, there's an inkiness to it here. There's a very soft leatheriness to it here, but some other flavors. And then this sort of smoky, dare I say, lightly meaty thing, playing with the peppers and stuff like that before, but again, understated in that sort of way. And then in the palate, it is very ripe, but it is very dry. The acid is definitely in the medium plus vein. It is tannic, particularly coming off of the delicious Gran Reserva Rioja that we just had with Tim. It makes me pucker up here, and the wine is quite long and quite expansive. It speaks to me very much of a single voice, whereas red wines oftentimes, certainly in the case of Rioja, are blended wines. This one has purity to it. All right.
Oh, here we are.
So here we go. We've got, and again, when we say something blend, that means it could be pure, but it could be blended with something else too. So could this be Malbec in a blend? Malbec certainly has depth of color, but it's generally not going to be nearly as tannic as this one in combination with such ripe fruit. Syrah certainly is a possibility. Grenache could certainly share that level of ripeness, but I'd ask myself a bit about the tannins. By definition. And then, of course, your old world, new world associations based on grape varieties you pick. And if this were a different grape other than those three above or blended appropriately, where would you go with it? That could be an interesting discussion too.
Yep. All right, let's see. We'll just give everybody just about 30 seconds more to take a look. Once again, anonymous. I do see a higher level of participation right now. So thank you for that.
It's definitely opening up too. I think something that Madeline pointed out when she tasted her first wine is everyone's finishing their voting earlier. And particularly I noticed as having now spent 3 years of tasting Master of the World bottles is 20 or 30 minutes in the glass is a bare minimum for the wines to really begin to show you their capacity and what they're doing. These wines get, pushed into these little bottles and they need some time to come up. And I'm really finding that this wine now, compared to when I tasted it earlier this afternoon, has really gone through a night and day change, and would even encourage you to go back and try some of your whites a little bit later.
Evan, did you get any blue fruit?
Blue fruit, not so much. I definitely got black fruit. Blue fruit to me, I associate with a number of varieties, one in particular, Malbec, that you can pick it up with, but not so much here. It was really more a combination of red and black. Maybe red and blue, you get purple.
And you said kind of like the green fennel. Did you also get eucalyptus? Jenny was getting
yeah, not so much. Eucalyptus to me comes off more as that sort of cool minty character, or like literally a eucalyptus grove or something like that has a very unique and distinctive thing here. The greens I'm getting here tend to be more herbal by definition, and tend to be more vegetable. Eucalyptal tends to be more resiny to me, and more piney or more tree-ish, if you will, from the essential oils that would come from that, and associated with certainly could be certain varieties for sure.
Gosh, we've got kind of all over the place with regions here. A third, and a third. Mostly
There'll be some good conversation around that. I look forward to it.
for sure. Should I go ahead and reveal?
Well, we can do that, and then I can talk about it later, because I think there's some idiosyncratic stuff to this wine that I do want to bring up, which might explain why some people are in different places.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so here we go. We're going to see where we are.
Africa, no, darn. Back to Europe, back to France, back to the Rhone Valley. Here we are with our friends at Domaine Coursaudon. We are in the northern Rhone Valley. spinning around there. You can see the Rhone off to the top there, the river, as we do our sort of circular view here. But the people at Coursaudon are doing a tremendous job here. As we look at the map, you'll notice that the Northern Rhone, which represents just a small modicum of the wine production of the Rhone Valley, the Rhone runs long, but the lion's share of production, as most of us know, is really down in the south, and the north is a small place. This comes from a particular area called Saint-Joseph, which in the context of the Northern Rhone is the largest appellation geographically in the Northern Rhone, because so many of the other starlets, Côte-Rôtie, Hermitage, etc., are very, very small by definition. Coursaudon's a terrific property. And what I love about what they're doing here, both in Saint-Joseph and as well as in Crozes-Hermitage, led by a handful of just pioneering folks, of which I would put Coursaudon in that character. I would put Alain Gréaud, may he rest in peace, recently of Crozes-Hermitage is another one, are taking areas that were generally considered just, you know, for lack of a better word, entry levels into the big wines of the Northern Rhone, Hermitage and Côte-Rôtie, and actually showed people that if you pick specific soils, villages, and places, you can coax out extremely high quality out of these wines. Saint-Joseph, I remember when I was living in Paris in the late 70s and early 80s, was a wine that you just sort of went to a bar and you ordered a glass of wine and you got this sort of chipper, almost Beaujolais-like wine called Saint-Joseph that was sort of Rhone-y by nature, but it was more candied, if you will. And the wines have gotten infinitely more savory and serious over time. And remember that they make three flavors. There's a red primarily, but there's also a white and also a pink that it comes here. And these wines are 100%, well, I should say this wine is 100% Syrah. But what I like about these wines, as opposed to showing you, you know, a wine like Hermitage or Côte-Rôtie, now is that the wines are actually approachable. That's what I enjoy most about Crozes-Hermitage and Saint-Joseph, is not only are they not going to take a second mortgage on your house to buy them, but they don't need 15 years in your cellar to really be able to appreciate them. As you can see here, they tend to be more foothills. They're not as vertigo inducing as the hillsides of Côte-Rôtie, the roasted slope, or of Hermitage, which look more akin to what we saw in the German wines with Tim than that. This is Jérôme Coursaudon, who makes the wines here and does a tremendous job. That's his white Saint-Joseph on the right-hand side. That is not an albino red Saint-Joseph wine. And what's great about what he's done is he's selected a few parcels, most notably older vines. These are averaging 30 plus years of age, all decomposed granitic soils in the areas of Mauve, Glun, and Tournon, and really has done a great job giving a sense of place to this wine. That's 15% whole cluster. It's treated like a Grand Vin, and even as a more quote-unquote modest bottling like a Saint-Joseph, you could put this away for a few years. However, I wanted to answer the one thing that was perhaps the curveball here. I'm used to having Rhone wines, and they should be like black pepper, Evan, right? They should be all full of Rotendon, right? I want to remind you that 2019 as a vintage was the first in a series of infernally hot vintages there. And the wines are what they would call millésime californien, or almost California or New World like here. So rather than having a more savory element and a much more pronounced peppery Rotendon driven character, the wines here are very ripe. This wine is, it says on the label, it's 14.5. I would suggest to you it's probably closer to 14.8. It's generous, and the fruit is I don't want to say syrupy, but it's really generous for a wine like this. And what it does is that downplays the pepperiness, the meatiness, the garriguiness even of the wine that's there, and makes it seem more like a California take on a Syrah and less like a classic Rhone take. So vintage is still important, guys, particularly as we're in a time of climate change.
That's great. I wanted to just say, Andrea had a really great, not our Andrea, Andrea Hoffman on the chat here, had a really great question. And if Andrea, you're going to be around during the happy half hour, we'll answer that over there. The question, Evan, for you to think about is what clues really pointed to the old world, but we will hold that thought. We want to go to wine number 6, Madeline.
Unmute, yay, okay. I love, by the way, listening to Tim and Evan. It's really a pleasure, and we've all known each other for a long time, to hear each other speak about wine, because we've got different approaches, and it's always instructive. So that said, wine number 6. Visually quite similar to wine number 5, perhaps not quite as extracted, but again, if you turn the wine in the glass, it's staining the glass and you can't see a damn thing through the center of it. And if you go to the very rim, it's positively purple or violet, even blue tinged red, and you don't really see a gradation, not of hue, but just of intensity of color till you get to the very, very rim. So, don't think that simple perceptions are not wildly useful, because this is telegraphing a smaller, thick-skinned grape variety in a wine in its youth. It does move easily in the glass, though. So again, I make no conclusions looking at it, but it's part of the picture. It may not be super high in alcohol. It's not, moving slowly. So hold that thought. Aromatically, you don't have to fight to get the fragrance on this wine. It's to me a combination of blue and black fruit. There might be a little bit of red hiding in there. And we throw around the words ripe and jammy and baked as if they're all one and the same thing. But I would say you have to be somewhat, clear-headed and surgical about defining. This to me is perfectly ripe fruit. It doesn't really smell confected. Maybe a little bit of a jammy character to it, but very pretty. And on the heels of this super ripe blueberry and black cherry fruit with maybe a little bit of red raspberry deciding to be black raspberry, you get just a wave of fresh florals and potpourri too. So this combination of, dark potpourri. So nothing high toned, it's more pulling you into darker flowers like lavender and violet and maybe a little bit of rose. But, aromatically, I certainly get some oak, but it's perfectly integrated. It's not annoying. It's not sitting on the wine, which sometimes can happen with young concentrated reds, where the producer's gotten super enthusiastic about using a lot of new small barrels. I don't smell alcohol, but I smell a cool smell that connotes, high-toned herbs, but it's certainly not pyrozinic. It's not bell pepper. It just smells fresh. I'm going to take it on the palate and see if it's balanced in terms of what the flavor expresses. And it does. This is my particular obsession, is mid-palate. I like to, after I chew and spit or swallow, I often go back and just hold it on my palate and get this plumb line of flavor. But I find this wine is perfectly balanced in terms of the aromatics and the flavor, which, as we all know, are one and the same thing, right? So that combination of blue and black fruit, with I think blue leading a little bit. If there were any green elements on the palate, it's more sort of dark green leafy, maybe a little bit of an arugula character, but certainly not green. A little bit of a black olive character, but more like licorice. Maybe that's part of the cool element as well. But the florals are on the palate as well. Now, if I, my subconscious is telling me, pay attention to the structure and the tannin structure, especially because the tannins there are lots of them, but they're finely grained. It's a very neat mouthfeel. You can certainly taste the wine through the tannin. It doesn't lock the flavor down the way Nebbiolo will. And the acidity is refreshing. And also it seems perfectly natural. This is a personal bugaboo of mine, but I claim, I'm probably not right all of the time, that I can tell when acidity's been enthusiastically adjusted, particularly when the alcohol is high and you can imagine the acidity plummeting. Tim's going like this, yay. But this, I'm gonna go back to it one more time because there's another interesting element about this wine. And I swallowed it because it's positively delicious. The finish is a little short, but this is not connoting lesser quality. What it's saying to me is this is a wine that's got tremendous promise. and the length is to come. You know, at the moment, it's got a simplicity of primal fruit, florals, some other elements as well, finely grained tannins, fresh natural acidity, moderate alcohol. You know, Tim's test, I'm not feeling a lot of heat. So I think this is probably, if I had to put a number on it, certainly well under 15, probably closer to 14 or a little bit less. You know, I haven't mentioned much about earth, but I tell you what, lurking underneath it all, especially, is an expression of inorganic minerality, rocks, which our friend Wayne Belding will tell us, you know, smiling quietly. You can't really taste rocks, but there is an impression of a rocky character to this wine. I think knowing what it is, it's a beautiful example of type. And I think you could forget this in your basement if you bought a case of it and opened a bottle a year and see it slowly lengthen and also develop layers aromatically and flavor wise. So primary black and blue fruit, lots of smooth tannins, natural fresh acidity, moderate alcohol, integrated oak, Syrah, Malbec, Merlot, other. You know, just because we just had a Syrah, you know, don't ever let your mind do that to you. You know, not that we couldn't do two wines of the same varietal in a row, but you have to be able to, I think, consider everything, you know, and set the previous wine aside and not let it, you know, I love quoting Tim. He said once that there's a part of you that is desperate to know what the wine is when you're blind tasting. So you'll often take, you know, hints like that. Well, we just had Syrah, can't be that. But the previous wine had an opaque color and a lot of the elements that were similar in terms of the flavor of the fruit. Different kind of earth expression. Malbec and Merlot, very interesting to consider the two side by side. Please vote, please vote. But if I had to say Merlot, you know, depending if it's from the old world or the new world, I think it would have a stronger presence of red fruit in general. Malbec, you know, one of its thumbprints is a strong blue fruit character, but also black as well. If it were Merlot, Right Bank, Bordeaux, you would have, I think, more of an organic earth component to it, like the garden smell, right? Those of us who are digging up in our backyard right now. So we've got, you know, old world to consider, new world to consider, but I will PS this, you know, a very distinctive inorganic minerality to me, a rockiness to it. So, you know, don't write off the new world just because the fruit is primal on it.
All right, Madeline, I need to ask one question and then we're going to close the poll.
You got it.
Darby asked a really great question. What do you mean, or how would you describe this ripeness, this ripe fruit that you started with? What is this ripe fruit that you're talking
about? You know, if you can, again, you know, remember when you smell, you get a perfect strawberry, a perfect blueberry. And sometimes like with something like blueberry, it'll be more on the palate. With strawberry, it will be more aromatic. So take it down to a primal level of your own experience with perfectly ripe cherries, strawberries, blueberries, you know, raspberries, where you can smell the distinct aroma of the grape variety of the fruit, but at the same time you haven't cooked it on the stove and you're not making, you know, you're not making jam. So that's what I mean by perfectly ripe. You're not fighting to get the expression of the fruit, but nor has it veered into cooked or manipulated. Okay, here we go. Syrah blend. Bravo for people who are considering Syrah. Malbec has an edge over Merlot, but just 10%. Yep. And then I have to sort of page down to see, do we have, so 30% Old World France, 60% New World Argentina, which is speaking to the Malbec, I'd imagine, and some New World California. We're gonna
reveal in a minute, but I think, Madeline, we're running out of time. Just very quickly, what is pointing you to New World versus Old World in this case?
In this particular case, I think the fact that the fruit is so primal, and it's the first thing that I perceive, and it also commands my attention. I have to move it away slightly. The fact that the expression of earth to me is more inorganic, as opposed to, particularly with Bordelaise varietals, not so much forest floor and such. But again, one can be wrong.
All right, so let's take a look at where it is.
We
This
are
is the
going
last
to
reveal
the
of the
Southern
day.
Hemisphere. We are in Argentina. We are Catena, which people love to say Catania, and I don't think Laura Catena would mind at all, Laura, no matter how you pronounce it. We are in an area of the world that to me is thrilling, because it is exuberantly New World, but it has terroir up the kazoo. We're talking incredibly high altitude. And this particular wine evidently is around 2,700 feet, which is sort of, foothills for some of Argentina's vineyards. They can soar up to 5,000 and higher. This is a Malbec blend, it says, but this is actually 100% Malbec, and Catena's varietals tend to run that way unless they claim a blend. It's young. It is from a very specific area called Lunlunta, which interestingly is, I just did a virtual tasting with Laura a couple of weeks ago, lucky rabbit that I am. And evidently Lunlunta is considered, in her opinion, region 4. It's a warmer climate, but don't forget, you're in Argentina at high altitude. So what do you have? You have incredibly strong ultraviolet light. So the grapes protect themselves by developing thicker skins. And you have, dramatic diurnal swings, 30, 40, 50 degrees change in Fahrenheit at nighttime. Ergo, hello, all that lovely fresh acidity. You have, look at their Mayan inspired winery. How cool is that? Because Nicolas Catena didn't want to make it look like a chateau in Bordeaux. Or so he says. You've got very little rainfall, but look at the Andes. You've got incredibly pure mineral-driven runoff from the Andes. It's got to be the best irrigation in the universe. You've got no humidity because you've got the Zonda wind running through. And here is a great picture of Laura, who owns the winery with her father to the right, and then Virgil, Alexandro Virgil, who's the winemaker, and many other things for them. He's been with them for a long period of time. But these folks actually started an institute where they're doing some of the first and most in-depth studies on high altitude viticulture and the effect of climate change on high altitude viticulture, and also Malbec clonal selection. So I don't work for Catena. I'm just saying that, the mark of quality of this winery can't be overstated at most price points. And this is a moderately priced wine, is it not? I forgot the price point on this. Can you go back to the label?
Right here,
Yeah, 23 bucks, meditate on that for a second. What else to tell you? I think their use of oak is beautiful. It's integrated. They claim no new oak on this. I taste a little bit, and I will tell you that Laura just came out with a book. I'm not getting 5 cents a book. I'm just telling you that it sounds fluffy,
It's a good book.
Malbec Mon Amour, but it's got maps in there that are worth their weight in gold, and assessment of regional differences and even vineyard differences that are, it's worth picking up because it was very illuminating to me. And more importantly, I think this is a great example of Malbec. And my simple takeaway: blue dominant with black fruit, strong florality, low on the green measure, lots of smooth tannins, right? And, that inorganic earthiness, I think, is a great snapshot of classic Argentine Malbec. Gents, does that sound good enough for you?
We're running out of time, so I just wanted to go back to the winery because it was such a beautiful shot of the winery. And I know that we were guessing Argentina earlier when we were doing the Chardonnay, so it's nice that we finished off with the Argentina. We're gonna stay around for a little bit more for those of you who aren't busy cooking and can hang around with us for a little bit. There were some questions that we didn't get to. The question from Andrea, and also I think Aaron had a question about tasting older wines that will be interesting for us to get to. Until next time, if you have to leave, thank you so much for joining us the Friday before a big holiday weekend. Upcoming kits, May 16th, 1 p.m. we are trying different days of the week to see what works for people. So upcoming on a poll right now, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment, we're going to have 2 questions. First question, what day of the week works best for a webinar? We would love for your quick answer. Help us out, help us think about what's a good day to invite people to a webinar. You know, it's always going to have a recording available, but where do you guys think it's a good day to have a webinar? Just another 10 more seconds before we close it for the next question, which of course is going to be what time of the day, because we are talking about people on the East Coast, Central, Mountain Time, and of course the Pacific Time. While I let people answer here, and we're going to close the poll and go to the time part. I want to remind everyone that in the next newsletter that you're getting from us, you'll see a Mother's Day free shipping upgrade. We know that sometimes we're last minute in getting mom that gift. Shouldn't be last minute, but it is. And we're going to help you guys out. So if you've got a friend, a mom in your life that should get a girls' night in with some wine, or it's just somebody that you love and want to share with, we're going to do a free upgrade. And Barbara, who is the one who picks all our lovely wrapping papers, she does a lot more than that, but she's always got a great knack at picking some fun wrapping papers. All of these will be gift wrapped before they leave our winery. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Oh my goodness, I'm looking at the results coming in and I'm scared to decipher what time.
Oh no.
It's all over the place. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you want to stay on, Andrea is going to help me put everybody into panel mode. You can show your face or you can say, no, thank you, I'll just listen in. But the rest of us, we're going to be here for the next 20 minutes or so to hang around and have a wonderful holiday weekend. If you're going to be